Back in the year 2000, if you asked anyone on Wall Street to name a powerhouse company, one name would pop up again and again: Enron. It was the seventh largest corporation in America, a titan of the energy industry, celebrated for its innovation and seemingly unstoppable growth. Its stock was a Wall Street darling, and its leaders were hailed as business visionaries. But behind this glittering facade of success, a dark and complex web of deceit was being woven. One that would lead to one of the most infamous corporate collapses in history. Today, we're diving deep into the story of the Enron scandal, a tale of ambition, greed, and spectacular failure that changed the face of American business forever. So, what exactly was Enron? Founded in 1985 through a merger, it started as a relatively straightforward natural gas pipeline company, but under the leadership of its chairman, Kenneth Lay, and later its CEO, Jeffrey Skilling, Enron transformed itself. It became a sprawling energy trading giant, a commodities broker that dealt in everything from electricity and natural gas to pulp, paper, and even broadband internet capacity. They pitched themselves as the future of energy, a new kind of company for a new millennium. They were innovators, disruptors, and for a while, it seemed like they had the Midas touch. Their revenue figures soared, climbing from around $9 billion in the mid-90s to over $100 billion by 2000. It was an astonishing, almost unbelievable rate of growth. And as we'd soon find out, it was, in fact, unbelievable. The secret to Enron's apparent success was a toxic combination of aggressive accounting practices and a corporate culture that prioritized profits above all else, including ethics. One of the key players in this was the Chief Financial Officer, Andrew Fastow. Fastow was the architect behind a dizzying array of off-balance sheet entities, shell companies with exotic names like Raptors and Jedi. These were called Special Purpose Entities, or SPs. Now, SPs aren't inherently illegal, but the way Enron used them was. Their purpose was simple: to hide Enron's massive, ever-growing mountain of debt and to inflate its earnings. Here's how it worked in simple terms. Enron would sell its underperforming or risky assets to these SPs. This moved the asset, and more importantly, the associated debt, off of Enron's official books. The SP would pay for the asset, often using loans guaranteed by Enron stock. This created a transaction that Enron could record as a profit, boosting their financial reports and making the company look incredibly healthy and profitable. It was a house of cards. The SPs were controlled by Enron executives, like Fastow himself, who personally made millions from managing them. It was a massive conflict of interest, but as long as Enron's stock price kept rising, the whole precarious structure held together. Another key accounting trick they used was called mark-to-market accounting. For a typical company, you book revenue when you actually receive the cash. But mark-to-market allowed Enron to book projected future profits from a long-term deal as current income. Today, imagine signing a 20-year deal to supply electricity. Under this model, Enron could estimate how much money they thought they would make over the entire 20 years and report that entire amount as profit in the very first year. The problem: these projections were often wildly optimistic. based on assumptions that were little more than wishful thinking. It created billions in phantom profits that existed only on paper, fueling the illusion of incredible success and driving the stock price even higher. This high-stakes game couldn't last forever. The first cracks began to appear in early 2001. The dot-com bubble had burst, and the economic climate was becoming more uncertain. Enron's broadband division, which had been hyped as a huge source of future growth, was failing to deliver. As the stock price began to wobble, the entire house of cards started to teeter. Remember those SPs? Their stability was tied to Enron's stock value. As the stock fell, the SPs started to unravel, and the massive debts they were hiding threatened to come crashing back onto Enron's balance sheet. Internally, not everyone was blind to the deception. A vice president named Sharon Watkins, who had worked in Fastow's finance group, discovered the accounting irregularities. She saw the tangled mess of SPEs and understood the immense risk they posed. In August 2001, she wrote a now famous anonymous memo to CEO Ken Lay, warning him that the company could implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She laid out her concerns, comparing the situation to a house of cards that was about to collapse. Her warnings, however, were largely ignored by the top brass. The company conducted a cursory review with their lawyers, but ultimately decided to take no significant action. That same month, in a move that would later be seen as a huge red flag, CEO Jeffrey Skilling abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons. He had been CEO for only 6 months. His sudden departure spooked investors, and the stock price began to plummet. Ken Lay returned as CEO, trying to calm the markets and reassure everyone that the company was fundamentally sound. But the truth was starting to bubble to the surface. The dam finally broke in October 2001. Enron announced a staggering $638 million in third-quarter losses. But the real bombshell was another announcement. They were also taking a $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity, partly related to those partnerships run by CFO Andrew Fastow. The complex web of SPs was finally being exposed. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, immediately launched an investigation. Panic set in. Investors, employees, and the public realized that the company's financial statements were a work of fiction. The fallout was swift and brutal. Within weeks, Enron's credit rating was downgraded to junk status. The company was in a death spiral. Its stock price, which had peaked at over $90 a share just a year earlier, collapsed to less than $1. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At the time, it was the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history. The 7th largest company in America had vanished, practically overnight. The human cost was devastating. Over 20,000 Enron employees lost their jobs. But worse, many had invested their entire life savings and retirement funds into Enron stock, encouraged by executives who were secretly dumping their own shares. As the company collapsed, their 401ks were wiped out. They lost everything. The scandal also brought down Arthur Andersen, one of the world's big 5 accounting firms. Andersen was Enron's auditor and had been complicit in the fraud. Signing off on the misleading financial reports, and even helping to shred incriminating documents. When the investigation began, the firm was found guilty of obstruction of justice. And although the conviction was later overturned, its reputation was destroyed, and it effectively ceased to exist. In the aftermath, the U.S. government pursued criminal charges against the architects of the fraud. Andrew Fastow, the CFO, pleaded guilty and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, receiving a 6-year prison sentence. Jeffrey Skilling was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and insider trading and was sentenced to 24 years, though it was later reduced. Kenneth Lay was also found guilty but died of a heart attack before his sentencing, which resulted in his conviction being vacated. The Enron scandal was a wake-up call that exposed deep flaws in corporate governance and accounting oversight. The sheer scale of the deception led to landmark legislation. In 2002, the U.S. Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. This sweeping reform imposed stricter standards for public companies' boards and accounting firms. It required top executives to personally certify the accuracy of their company's financial statements, holding them directly accountable for fraud. The law aimed to restore public trust in the markets and prevent another Enron-style disaster from ever happening again. The story of Enron serves as a powerful cautionary tale. It is a story about what happens when greed runs rampant and ethics are cast aside. In the pursuit of profit, it shows how a corporate culture of arrogance and a win-at-all-costs mentality can lead to catastrophic failure, ruining lives and shaking the foundations of the financial system. It reminds us that behind the numbers on a balance sheet are real people and real consequences. The name Enron is now synonymous with corporate fraud, a lasting symbol of one of the darkest chapters in American business history. Thank you for watching. If you found this story interesting, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into fascinating historical events. See you next time.